Okay, President Joyce, we're all set.
Good morning. This is Rich Joyce, Board President of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy. I will now call this meeting of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy to order. Today is Wednesday, November 5, 2025, and it is 9 a.m. Board of Pharmacy meetings are conducted in accordance with the Oregon Public Meetings Law. Under the Public Meetings Law, governing body meetings are open to the public except as otherwise provided by law. The presiding officer has the authority to keep order and to impose any reasonable restrictions necessary for the efficient and orderly conduct of a meeting. Governing bodies are authorized by ORS 192.660 to meet in executive session in certain limited situations, including the consideration of information obtained by a health regulatory board as part of an investigation of license or applicant conduct. All official actions by the board must be taken by public vote, and the vote of each member must be recorded. Our mission: the Oregon Board of Pharmacy serves to promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare by ensuring high standards in the practice of pharmacy and through effective regulation of the manufacture and distribution of drugs. The Oregon Board of Pharmacy is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, DEIB, within its organization and for the public it serves. The commitment is reflected in board membership, agency staffing, the services provided, and its efforts to promote patient safety and ensure access to quality pharmacy care. The board encourages review of its full 2024-2026 DEIB plan located on the board website. I will now call roll for board and staff. For the record, when I call your name, please verbally acknowledge here. Board President Rich Joyce here. Board Vice President Amy Kirkbride.
Here.
Board Member Kat Chen.
Here.
Board Member Jennifer Hall.
Here.
Board Member Victoria Kroger.
Here.
Board Member Priyal Patel.
Here.
Board Member Anna Pineda.
Here.
Board Member Brian Smith.
Here.
Compliance Director Brianne Evermoff.
Here.
Licensing Director Christy Hennigan.
Here.
Operations Manager Rachel Melvin.
Here.
Executive Director Gary Runyon.
Here.
Now for some housekeeping items and meeting etiquette. Board agency staff, identify yourself as board agency staff member last name. Each time you speak, please speak one at a time and use the raise the hand feature in Teams when you have a question, when you have questions or comments, and silence all personal devices. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and retained for public record keeping purposes. We will now we will now review the board meeting. Excuse me. We will now review the board meeting agenda. Do board members have any proposed revisions to the meeting agenda? Board President Joyce, no. Board Vice President Kirkbride?
No revisions.
Board Member Chen?
No revisions.
Board Member Hall?
No.
Board Member Kroger?
No.
Thank you. Board Member Patel?
No, thank you.
And Board Member Pineda?
No revisions.
Okay. So is there a motion to move to approve the agenda as proposed?
You need to check in with Board Member Smith first, please.
Oh, excuse me. For some reason, that was left off.
Board Member Smith. No.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Smith. I apologize. I'm not seeing that. So is there a motion to move to approve the agenda as proposed?
Good, Board Member Chin.
Is there a second?
Second, Board Member Hall.
Motion passes. Now roll call vote. Board President Joyce, is this a roll call for
this? And you'll need to add Smith. He's missing
Oh,
from
yeah.
this one as well, sorry.
Okay, handwrite. I'll handwrite it.
Okay.
Board President Joyce, yes. Board Vice President Kirkbride.
Yes.
Board Member Chin.
Yes.
Board Member Hall.
Yes.
Board Member Kroger.
Yes.
And Board Member Patel.
Yes.
Board Member Pineda.
Yes.
Board Member Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We will begin with OBOP, strategic plan background, and then our current 2024 2029 strategic plan discussion with Executive Director Runyon. Go ahead. Executive Director Runyon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Executive Director Running. Thanks for showing up this early to attend and participate in this discussion. This might be slightly less formal than what we're accustomed to in the big conference room. And I hope that creates an environment where we can have a little fun with it, if you will, and really collaborate to explore the immense opportunities that present themselves inside of amending the strategic plan when we get to that point later next year. So I want to take a look at, Staff Member Melvin, do you have the presentation pulled up?
Yes. And I'll have to share my screen. Maybe this.
And just for the record, we'll attach this to the meeting summary for you, and because there are some good resources you may not want to look at right away, but as we approach next year and throughout, it would be good resources to look back at. So I did use AI for this graphic. I think it's interesting because if we're looking at the strategic plan as kind of a map, I looked at this at first and thought, well, if this guy's going to Hood, it's probably just straight from there, right? Like, I'm not sure to what extent you need a map for that. That's what you get when you use AI. And then there's a shadow across the map. Not really sure where that's coming from. Yeah, and if you zoom in on the lower right-hand corner, it looks like there's an outhouse there. So maybe he just needs to use the restroom really bad. I'm not sure where he's going, but then I thought, nothing is really ever straightforward with pharmacy. So maybe this graphic is applicable after all for the strategic plan. But yeah, there are a few of these interspersed throughout. So why are we here? We're going to assess our current strategic plan against agency-wide or enterprise-wide expectations. We have a special guest that'll be presenting around 10 a.m. Nicole Krishnaswamy is the ED from the Oregon Medical Board. So we can take that opportunity to learn from our sister agencies, if you will. And then we're going to explore a clear, accountable process for building our next plan as the board may see fit to do. And I want to equip you with the tools that you'll need to kind of frame or reframe your future experiences so you don't put planning for the strategic plan off until next October. Kind of similar to what we experienced with the last board meeting in October, where board member Kroger spoke up and made a suggestion about a potential opportunity to streamline the case review process. And then I saw a collective shift in focus from that point on. And then I encourage you to continue to do that, especially in the lens or as it relates to SDA. So I encourage you to do that here as well as we go through the presentation and then as we go through future board meetings to keep that focus in the background on how we can implement and incorporate any of your goals, any of your priorities into a more streamlined and succinct strategic plan. So we can use that as a report card to do the work under your directives, so the public can use that. We can increase the transparency and visibility and thereby build trust with the public, so they can use that to see, hey, is the agency a good steward of the resources that they've been given, and where is their progress and how does that relate to their mission? And then you can use that to ensure that we're doing a good job here at the agency. I do want to share a super quick story about something I ran into in the news. There was this cyclist, Denise Muller-Korniak, I believe, and she was, I think she broke the world land speed record on a bicycle. It was like 183 miles per hour. She's being towed behind this drag car, right? So not only was she towed until she hit about 100 miles per hour, but there was this kind of force field, it looked like, in front of her, kind of blocking the wind, reducing the drag. So I thought, okay, anyone could do that, right? If they just reduce the barriers, you took all the barriers out, anyone could, make those achievements. And then, of course, my wheels started spinning as fast as hers probably were. And I was like, okay, let me let me say that again. Like, okay, so anyone can achieve success if they reduce barriers or obstacles and they create and capitalize on synergistic partnerships with people who are headed in the same direction. And then, the wheels kept turning, and I thought, okay, how can I incorporate that into my own life, personally, professionally? What sort of things do I use as crutches at work? What sort of things have I conditioned myself to believe that I need that I really don't? What things do I incorporate into my schedule or my way of being or working that no longer serve me? And it catalyzed this reevaluation of things, both personal and professional. And so I think that's fitting because we have an opportunity here to perhaps later streamline this plan, remove things that we once thought we needed that may no longer serve us or be the direction of the current board, and just kind of get back to the basics and simplify everything. I think there's a tremendous benefit for doing that. I always like to be upfront about the intentions or my intentions. So, shocker, I do feel that we should change this plan, and that assertion or bias, if you will, is kind of interspersed throughout. And of course, whether and how you do that is entirely up to you, if you choose to do so. But I just want to be upfront that it is my opinion that we have some opportunities for significant change to that plan, and I'll go into detail throughout about the potential benefits of that, not only in the agency itself and between the agency and the board, but also the potential benefits that the interested parties out in the public see. Last thing I'll say is that I want to make it clear, even though I suggest that or I'm in favor of us amending this plan, I'm not disparaging the plan by any means. But some things look better on paper than they do in practice, right? I think that's how I ended up with a slap chop and too many TV items. It's like, okay, the concept is there, but in practice it doesn't work. So I think once we tried to put this strategic plan in practice, a lot of these derivative thoughts or considerations and actions came from that. So it's not a repudiation of the plan itself. It's essentially just incorporating feedback from staff as we've tried to implement it, and discussed ways that we could streamline the process and make it easier to operationalize so we can see direct benefit from it. Next slide. And of course, as President Joyce read, our mission is to promote and protect public health, safety, and welfare by ensuring high standards in practice of pharmacy and through effective regulation of the manufacture and distribution of drugs. And our vision, which also correlates to our DEIB plan and equity statement, is that all Oregonians have equitable access to medication and pharmacy services provided safely and conveniently through a network of highly skilled and dedicated pharmacists, interns, and pharmacy technicians, along with a well-regulated manufacturing and distribution. And these values essentially reflect how we conduct ourselves or how we do business. And the cornerstones of these values are equity, service, safety, adaptability, integrity and accountability, and professionalism. And this is our equity statement. Of course, we're committed to DEIB. And I just highlighted essentially the four principles that guide our approach, the cornerstones of those. So we strive to create and sustain a welcoming, safe, and inclusive culture, both within and without the agency. We strive to foster an inclusive environment. We are dedicated to creating culturally responsive service delivery, and also dedicated to safe and timely access to medications, regardless of place of residence, economic or social status, physical ability, ethnicity, or gender. And here's a basic outline. So some of you were not part of this strategic plan's development. So we'll go through some of the basic tenets of constructing and implementing a plan, which will not only help you in the future, as I think everyone on the board now will be on the board next November, and when we look at this again. So it will not only help you then, but it will also help you understand the strategic plan we have now and have perhaps a better appreciation for it, and help you contextualize the information presented therein, which may help you, in terms or in turn interact with agency staff, and it may help or better equip you to do your job as a board member. So we'll focus on our current plan. After that, we'll do a deep dive. And around 10 a.m., we'll have our partner spotlight. So Nicole Krishnaswamy from the medical board will introduce her plan and talk about its construction and give some pearls of wisdom from her experience there. And then there are some suggestions, loose suggestions for a path forward, where I've identified opportunities and potential corresponding solutions for your consideration throughout and then next November. And then we'll end with a brief summary discussion. And the next slide will go into the goals, or what I want you to get out of this is understanding the basic elements of the strategic plan construction and implementation. We'll throughout reassess our current plan against evolving and static expectations. We'll again learn from the successes of our partner agencies. And what I hope to do is inspire an enduring curiosity and foster an open dialogue as we collectively entertain future iterations of our plan and what that might be. So here's a little background on the purpose and structure of the strategic plan. So Governor Kotek in service for all Oregonians, and this vision aims to empower 42,000 public servants to deliver the essential services and support Oregonians throughout. New strategic plans have been established to guide the work, break down silos, and enhance systems better serve individuals and families across the state. So these plans include, but are not limited to, the strategic plan. And this is the definition or directive from the governor's office. So a good strategic plan, in other words, should provide clear direction and focus. It should guide the agency toward achieving its long-term goals and fulfilling its mission, and also the governor's vision, initiatives, and directives. So in conceptualizing this is a Venn diagram that I created, trying to wrap my mind around, conceptually, what is the strategic plan? Where does it lie as it relates to governor's initiatives, board directives, mission, staff operations, or action? How does that fit in, or how should it fit in? So I think I'm not really great with colors, but that dark area in the center, that's not red and it's not green, I can tell you that. That's where a good strategic plan should fit in. So in other words, it should outline staff action such that the achievement and satisfaction of the governor's initiatives and the support and achievement of the board's mission and directives are spelled out. And there's an accountability associated with it. There are clear actions and directives assigned. There are incremental mile markers, if you will, or progress indicators along the way. And there's a clear picture of what success looks like and a clear benefit attached to that. And also a timeline or timelines attached to it as well. So as we go throughout, I encourage you to just kind of revert back to this or refer back to this when you're trying to see how a good strategic plan should fit in and you're evaluating how our strategic plan might fit into this diagram now. Next slide. So what are the governor's initiatives? There are a few of them. These are the top 3 for 2025. She is interested in addressing the housing and homelessness crisis, improving access to behavioral health and addiction care, And I'm happy to say that, a lot of the work that we've done and continue to do on SB 236 with pharmacists prescribing of medications for opioid use disorder fits into this. So it's nice to know that we are acting in alignment with the governor's core priorities, and we have the support there as needed. And then, of course, another priority is education, especially K through 12. And then aside from these mission-focused priorities, we have agency expectations. So some of these you'll see incorporated throughout the strategic plan. And then I think there are opportunities that I'll talk about later where we can incorporate a few more of these into a future iteration of our plan. But these include audit accountability, performance feedback for employees. So we do that quarterly. The goal is 90% or higher. Every time that I've checked recently, we've been at 100%. So I commend my managers for making the time to execute those. They've been of tremendous value for us here. Employee satisfaction surveys. I think the goal is at least 60% response rate on that, give or take. DEIB plans, which of course we have succession planning for the workforce. I think that plan is due at the end of December. Working on that. Agency hiring practices. It's an expectation that any open position is filled in 50 days or less from the time it's open. And there are a few more. New employee manager development. So these outline general training, customer service training, benefits training, etc. We have managing information technology or IT progress. Of course, we also have an IT strategic plan, which we submitted, I believe, this summer. Go down a little bit more. We have a continuity of operations plan or COOP plan, and there at the bottom.
Great.
Okay. All right, so here are a few things to keep in mind as we go forward. A few characteristics about what a good strategic plan is and what it isn't. A good strategic plan to me, it's kind of like the board. I see it as a living entity. It's not a document, it's a living, ongoing process or a management tool to make sure that staff is operationalizing the board directives and achieving our mission and satisfying the governor's initiatives, et cetera. And it goes back to that Venn diagram I showed earlier. A few other characteristics, I think a good strategic plan is aligned with all of those that I mentioned from the Venn diagram. So governor's initiatives, board direction, et cetera. It's actionable. So it moves from high-level goals to specific items that the team can incorporate into their daily, weekly, monthly operations. And it's accountable. So it uses clear directives and measurable metrics to ensure that these priorities are owned by someone and that there's an accountability through that ownership. I think a good plan also reaffirms and communicates the core identity of the agency. So it incorporates mission, vision, values that we covered earlier. It integrates top-down directives. So again, governor's priorities, but it also integrates bottom-up feedback. So feedback we might get from employee engagement surveys, feedback we might get externally from interested parties, etc. So a good strategic plan, again, it represents the kind of melding of all of those internal and external forces into something that's workable for staff. And next one. So there's a lot to go over here. This is a general kind of approach to developing a strategic plan. So we mentioned that a good strategic plan should reaffirm and communicate the central identity of the agency itself. Number one, again, define mission, vision, values, and equity statement. Second part of the process is conducting a PESTLE analysis. So identifying that equilibrium that's created from all of the external and internal factors that influence the board and the agency and its activities. So things like economic, political, economic, sociological, technological, legal, and environmental factors. That's where the acronym comes from. Number 3, after you do that, you conduct a SWOT analysis, or strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and the T is, I have to come back to that. I always forget the T. Or a SWO analysis, if you forgot what the T is. Number 4, I know someone on the call is like, how could you forget the T? I know what it is. Number 4 is set goals and objectives. And, I have that kind of outlined with the graphic on the bottom. Number 5 is develop strategies, create an action plan. And 7, I think, is sometimes overlooked. We can do all those things, but ensuring that we have the resources, number 1, and to allocate the resources, number 2, to essentially complete the directives, I think it's really important. That ties into the budget also, which is one of the suggestions at the very end in terms of identifying gaps and potential solutions, is incorporating budgetary goals and milestones to increase the transparency. I know it's a big thing for me, and given our past experience, it's a big thing for the board as well, especially as it relates to the budget. So I think there's an opportunity there to infuse all that budget information into the strategic plan, specifically as it relates to staff's ability to execute all of the directives. And then, of course, a key component is the ability to monitor and evaluate. And that'll go back to the nature of the goals and objectives, and whether or not they follow the SMART method, which we'll go over. We'll go over that. And this is from the governor's office and DAS. So this is just a checklist for, to determine whether or not the strategic plan meets certain criteria. And I've developed a very short checklist for us that you'll see on the right-hand side as we do a deep dive into our strategic plan. And we won't check the boxes off, but I encourage you to kind of frame the information that we're going to discuss through that lens, and just casually, when we're going through the information, just see, okay, does this check this box or not? And if not, why? And how could we create a situation or scenario, or amend that current objective to satisfy that criteria? Next slide. And so those of you that have looked at our strategic plan, which I hope is everyone at some point, know that there are 6 pillars. And I think that's one of the things that the strategic plan in its current form does really well, is that there's a strong focus on a clearly identified set of values and our mission and vision and so on. And these key pillars are identified and are easy to look at as a silo, and easy to understand how they interrelate to all of the other ones. So we'll go over the first 3 here on this slide. Licensees. So focusing on individual pharmacists, interns, and technicians who provide knowledge, judgment, and service central to the practice of pharmacy. Registrants includes focusing on organizations and locations that dispense prescription and non-prescription medications, as well as those that manufacture and distribute drugs. Innovations, the 3rd pillar, focuses on practices and technologies that advance the practice of pharmacy while maintaining a high standard of safety, access, and equity. Slide. Operations focuses on the processes, procedures, and systems that support safe and equitable pharmacy practice and the agency's ability to deliver high quality, efficient services. Regulation and compliance focuses on the systematic review and updates to Oregon administrative rules, or OARs, the continuous assessment, including investigations and inspections. to ensure licensees and registrants adhere to regulations. And lastly, communication, which focuses on information conveyed to the public, licensees, and registrants, to ensure transparency, foster collaboration, and promote safety and equity in all aspects of pharmacy practice. So we'll start to take a deeper dive into our strategic plan, and you can even jot these down if you want, or maybe just jot down a few of them that resonate with you, or write your own questions down. Again, so we just want to create a lens through which you can view and evaluate our current plan. Again, against number one, the governor's initiatives and enterprise-wide expectations. Number two, your own mission, vision, values, or directives or priorities, things that are important to you. And then three, through the lens of what is actionable for staff, what is attainable for staff, and what does that look like? So again, these questions might include, is it clear? Is our goal and key action attainable? Is it aligned with governor's initiatives, expectations, or directives? Is there clear ownership? In other words, do we know who's responsible for carrying out the action? Is there a benefit? There are some things that, again, sound good on paper, but when you execute them, if you can, where's the value there? Does it discernibly or palpably change the quality of service that we provide? Does it have a direct benefit in terms of patient safety, et cetera? Are we doing it to check a box, or are we doing it to improve the quality of what we do? And sometimes there is a difference there. Lastly, this goes along with the resources that I mentioned earlier. Is there actual capacity for staff to allocate the resources to do it? Do we have the positions to do it? Do we have the equipment to do it, et cetera? And again, those are all valuable components of a good strategic plan, because we want to set the agency up for success, right? We don't want to create a plan that looks good on paper, but in practice is impossible to implement. And I think doing that, or avoid doing that, will help increase public trust and will allow us to be more transparent and more connected to the work we do, and take more pride in the work that we do, which I think is really important. Up to the next one. So the next several slides, what we're going to do in this deep dive, I've taken all of the pillars, which you'll see up top. So we're going to start with licensees, and I've taken the goals and directives, or the key actions, and we're going to dissect those. And then on the right, you'll see the box that I mentioned that just kind of reminds you of those criteria that constitute a good strategic plan, but also on a smaller scale constitutes a solid or sound goal and key action. So again, is it clear? Is it attainable? Is it aligned? Is it assigned, or is there ownership? Is it beneficial? And do we have the resources to execute it? So what we'll see here, starting out in A, let's go ahead and read this and kind of set the tone for what we're going to focus on as we go through each individual slide. And some of these I don't have much comment on. And again, this is my own personal bias. So take it with a grain of salt or sand, whatever you prefer. And I think the intent here is just to, again, inspire that sense of curiosity. And because we have the platform and the ability to make this plan whatever we want and tailor it to our needs, our directives, et cetera, as the pharmacy practice, or in coordination with, or in response to, the evolution of the pharmacy practice, which is different now than it was when this strategic plan was created, when it was implemented, and it will be different by the time we reach next November, most assuredly. And also there is an influence of the board's evolution throughout that timeline as well. So I'll go ahead and read the first goal underneath the licensee pillar is to promote deployment and effective implementation of newly adopted licensee rules to ensure the achieve intended outcomes of clarity, diversity, professional competency, and commitment to patient care and safety. So if I was a member of the public, or I was an interested party, or you just put this on my desk and said, what do you think about this, not knowing what agency it was tied to or was going, I might identify that there's a lot of subjectivity in this paragraph A. When it says they achieve intended outcomes, who is directing those outcomes? What are those outcomes? And who's responsible for that? And how can they be measured? If we don't know what they are, those outcomes are, how can they be measured? We're talking about outcomes of clarity and diversity and professional competency, which might be outside of the board's purview to begin with. And notice that it doesn't say increase patient safety, for example. And it says identify, well, in number 1, we'll go ahead and go down. Monitor questions, concerns, and impacts of new licensee rules to assess their effectiveness in promoting, keyword, safety and equity, and identify any unintended consequences and or need for clarification. So notice that it says promoting safety, it doesn't say improving safety. So there's a difference there. Was that the intention, right? As we want to increase patient safety. In some instances, we can measure that, but promoting safety is different. It's, of course, a component of increasing safety, arguably, but was that the intent? And it says identify unintended consequences, but it doesn't say or set expectations around resolving those unintended consequences. And the word monitor is more of a process-oriented than outcome-oriented suggestion or action. And number 2, under key actions, act as needed. That is also sort of ambiguous. It would be hard to attach some sort of measurable outcome to that, and therefore be difficult to attach or create some sort of incremental mile marker or progress indicator for that. It also mentions in number 2 the intended results. I would assume that's the intention of the board, but what does that look like? We don't have that currently spelled out in the plan. And you'll see this sort of these sorts of conjectures interspersed throughout the rest of the slides, where there may be some ambiguity, there may be a lack of clarity in terms of who's responsible for carrying out the actions, what those actions should look like, what we do with the end result of those actions or the derivative outcomes, and how that interrelates to all of the board directives, governor's initiatives, staff actions, etc. So in other words, where is the benefit from that, and do with it? Go to next slide. So we'll continue on with the licensees. Goal B, enhance and or support factors that can positively impact the well-being and ability of licensees to serve patients safely and equitably. So key actions, number 1, let's focus on collect and analyze data to gain insight into trends. Okay, so what are we objectively to do with that data after we collect and analyze it, which we don't, if I'm honest, we don't really have the resources to do at this point. And, I think that will be also dependent upon the new operating software, if you will, which hopefully will be implemented by the end of next year. So I think the ability to do that, provided that we have the hours, the staffing to dedicate to it, is highly contingent upon the execution of that database modernization. And then again, in number 1, licensee diversity, job competence, and satisfaction. So to me, those are unrelated concepts. And I don't know that the board or the agency itself has a direct impact on job competence and satisfaction. As you'll see later, job satisfaction may be tangentially related to Safe Pharmacy Practice Conditions Initiative, but it's several degrees removed. So again, full of more questions and answers. Is that sort of thing significant enough to put in a plan? And can we measure directly or even remotely, if we're doing it indirectly, the efficacy of what staff is doing on a daily basis? We'll go down to number 4, support licensee access to and prompt utilization of resources to address behavioral and mental health service needs. So we can by all means support access to, but the prompt utilization, providing that there's appropriate and equitable access to these tools, really again lies outside of our purview. And we don't provide a lot of those services, even though we would arguably, and we do, we provide links to those resources. But since we don't provide the resources themselves or the services, we don't really have any way to assess, evaluate the prompt utilization of the resources. Go to the next one. So underneath each pillar, it gives a guideline for executing the plan. And I'll cover this at the end just to wrap everything up. But as we go through, I also want to give you a little background so you can see how all of these things fit into suggestions at the end. So what you'll notice on the right is that we do have a timeline, but it's not really objective, right? It's more of a duration than a timeline that has incremental goals along the way, which is really important. It's like getting in your car and taking a 1,000-mile trip across the country, or I guess 3,000 miles if we're headed back to Tennessee. You know, you don't wait until mile 3,000 to check and see if you're headed in the right direction. You may be in the wrong place, and you don't want to do that in Tennessee. So you have to measure, you have to analyze that along the way. So the increment is really important. It's not really spelled out in any of the executing the plan sections for these pillars, which is, you know, one thing that I have highlighted at the end and would suggest, and again, you can pay attention to along the way. So we have in selected actions, third one down, collect and analyze licensee data. And we follow the star at the bottom. Anticipated data points include job satisfaction, demographics by type, diversity trends, etc. So what is staff to do? Provided that we can collect that, what do we do with that data? The job satisfaction in particular, diversity trends in particular, outside of our direct operations here at the agency. How can we meaningfully affect job satisfaction? I said earlier, again, it may be tangentially related to some of the rate of actions of the Safe Pharmacy Practice Conditions Initiative, but several degrees of separation there. I'm not sure it's a good measure of what we're doing on the daily, if you will, here at the agency. And then below that, one from the bottom, show positive trends in one or more measures. It's not really objective, right? And is a positive trend a 1% increase? And it seems more like an end goal than an incremental measure or progress indicator. Go to the next one. So next we'll move to registrants. Not as much to say here. I think we've made incremental progress on this through our weekly rules group that we have when applicable. And there are a lot of actions we're still just kind of riding the coattails of the former consultant, Jen, things that she started that we're just kind of pushing to the finish line. And then, you know, I appreciate the feedback from the board. If we think back to the policy topics ranking list and the redistribution of those, or the rule ranking list, if you will, as presented in February, revisited in April. And it's really helpful for staff, and it gives a little more objectivity and clarity to your expectations and how we can implement that into our operations here on a routine basis. But again, in key actions, for example, establish clear goals. This would actually be a great place to have established the clear goals, right? Because now we take this and staff has to go back with board direction and kind of strategize as to what those might look like. And then it's not in the strategic plan. So another thing as we go forward, I think a good strategic plan also should be like a report card, right? You should be able to pick it up, not knowing anything about the agency. I could go to ODOT or Department of Energy, pick up their strategic plan, not knowing anything about the agency, look at the expectations, the timelines, then look online with the dashboard or the resources that they provided and tell you whether or not they're doing a good job, whether they're meeting their statutory directives, governance initiatives, board directives, et cetera. So that's one thing that I think is missing here and interspersed again throughout, especially when it comes to executing the plan sections, is that it says establish clear goals, but there are no goals established here. And the strategic plan is the place where you should have those established. So something to consider going forward. Go to the next slide. Don't have much to add for a couple of these registrants slides. This fits into the DSCSA modifications, which is a higher priority for us, of course, in the weekly rules group. Go to the next one. So I'll read C. Engage with public and other interested parties to tackle challenges faced by registrants in ensuring equitable access to medication, addressing workforce shortages, and ensuring patient safety. So it looks like most of our involvement in that is actually addressed in goal A, and it's related to writing rules in such a way that promotes equitable access via these non-pharmacy registrants. So again, this goal is actually mostly taken care of by goal A and the associated key actions. Key action 1, identify individuals, groups, and locations facing obstacles to accessing pharmacy services and or ability to join the practice of pharmacy. This to me seems to involve licensees, registrants, and interested parties. And so the rules and the rules of engagement are a little different from the vantage point of each one. And it says identify those individuals, but what do we do once we've identified it, right? There's no clear action and directive after that. So again, what do we do with that information? And is there a tangible link to direct patient benefit? I'm not sure I can answer that. And then number 2, I've already mentioned the SPPC, but considering enhancements, what does that mean? So again, no outcome attached to that. What does that look like? Can we measure it? And if we can't really measure it, does it belong in here in the first place? This would have been a great place to have linked job satisfaction to, if we're going to at all, is the SPPC. It's one of the only touch points that I could foreseeably argue where what we do is related to that. Slide. Then here's the executing the plan for the registrants. Again, selected actions and progress indicators mentioned for SPPC, but goal is mentioned. What are the metrics here? And if there are no metrics, how can we gauge success? And if we look at, let's see, the third bullet point down under selected actions, just for example, why would it take 2 years to quote unquote study and propose ways to ensure access to medications and pharmacy services, which is the third arrow down? It seems like in some cases, we're reviewing these executing the plan slides, there are derivative actions that are the timelines for which are sort of parallel to, I guess there is a primary action and derivative actions, and the timelines are all parallel, where the primary action upon which the derivative actions depend should have a shorter timeline for completion, and we don't always see that in these executing slides. So that's one thing or another thing I would consider looking at as well. Go to the next slide. Not a lot to say here. I do think key actions 2 and 3 are really interrelated. So if we read 3, examining potential applications and implications of AI in the context of the board's work would necessarily involve number 2, which is identifying areas where the board can act to facilitate the safe and effective implementation of innovative technology solutions. And then again, there are no concrete actions, incremental progress indicators, or deadlines associated with this. For example, we examine that, but what do we do with it? We identify areas where the board can act, but what do we do with that? We monitor, but how often do we monitor? How often do we report? And what do we do with that? And that's where that's what we should cover in key actions, right? Those are more of key concepts that dictate what the key actions would look like. Next slide. And number 1 under key actions, similar to what I just mentioned, we'll continue progress in providing online information resources while ensuring these solutions do not exclude those with limited or no online access. That seems a bit incongruous to me. I understand the intent there is providing informational resources to those that do not have limited or no online access, but we wouldn't provide online tools to people with no online access. So I might suggest rewording that. Though again, I understand the intention there. And again, in the key actions, there's no concrete or measurable action and no complementary timeline is outlined. Next slide. And the first dot under selected actions, for example, assess uptake and impact of pharmacy technology solutions. So what are we doing with that assessment? And you'll see at the bottom under progress indicators, we have verbs like collect, collaborate, etc. But there really is no key action or measurable incremental progress indicator that we can attach to that. So I always say I like to put the count in accountability. In other words, if you can't quantify something or you can't measure it, you can't track it, it's probably not going to get done. And again, most of these are process oriented and not outcome oriented, which is really the cornerstone of a good strategic plan. Go to the next slide. You'll probably have time to get through the operations pillar and before Nicole comes in, so I'll try to speed through these. For key action 1, A, we want to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of registrant self-inspection forms and guidance documents. So my question is, how do we measure the effectiveness of that? Is it through compliance or non-compliance as measured out in the community upon inspection? Again, there are a lot of factors involved in that, and the self-inspection form, again, is probably at best tangentially related to that, the efficacy of it. So again, something diffuse or nebulous that I'm not really sure how to measure, and I'm not sure what impact that has in the overall spectrum. We can ensure they remain relevant, which is the last portion of that, informative and easy to understand, and we already do this yearly with our updates. And then 1B, expand access to PIC and other trainings. We're already doing this online, and it's actually part of the now bi-monthly board report, which hopefully you all got yesterday. So we track those in absolute terms and then going forward relative terms as well, so you can see the incremental progress or increase in the utilization of those. And number 2, applications are under revision and made progress on a few of them, as you know. We're picking back up more condensed or consolidated work on that in December, give or take, as time and resources allow. Go to the next slide. Not much to add here either. REB, ensure the agency has capacity, capability, and diversity to achieve operational and strategic priorities, deliver effective service to customers, and optimize resource utilization. I've taken a lot of key actions since assuming this role that are in alignment with these expectations. So they're not things that we routinely report on in the strategic plan, and they're more things that I include in the bi-monthly board report or at the board meetings when I give a strategic plan update. You see a lot of these processes that are included. Go to the next one. And this is one I'm a big fan of, actually, improved support for board member engagement and participation. I think we've come a long way in terms of continuously modifying the board member orientation. And we had really great success, if you ask me anyway, with President Joyce and Vice President Kirkbride. We made a lot of changes to the onboarding as a result of feedback internally and externally, and then also with board member Smith. So we continue to look for ways to increase engagement with you and to kind of modify that process as the board itself continues to evolve, so we can better equip board members to do their job, and hit the ground running from the very first session onward. Go to the next one. And then I'll take a look at the progress indicators here. The first bullet, increase the percentage of self-serve online services and transactions by licensees and registrants. Increase from what to what, right? What is a meaningful change there? What does that look like? Bullet point 2, track enrollment growth in key training courses. Again, we do that to some extent in these reports. But what are we doing with the tracking, and what's the goal? Are we aiming for a certain percentage increase? Or are we aiming for a parallel increase in uptake or utilization between pharmacists and technicians and interns, et cetera? So that isn't really spelled out here. The third, or let's go to the fourth bullet point, timely completion of governor's initiatives. It'd be a great place to kind of spell some more of these out in the strategic plan. As I went over all of the governor's initiatives and expectations for the agencies at the beginning of the presentation, I think there is more room to incorporate a few of those into our strategic plan. So you can take a look at the plan. You can take a look at our website and or dashboard if our database modernization provides us with the tools that we can use to easily obtain those metrics and that data. You can just take a look at those two things and without any information tell, hey, is the agency doing what it's supposed to? Is Gary doing what he's supposed to? Is he directing staff to do what they're supposed to? Does all that coalesce with our directives, the governor's expectations and initiatives, et cetera? And then the fourth point, I think at the very bottom, it says monitor and report on the impact of implemented process and system improvements. How are we to monitor that? How often are we to report? And what is the end game there and the end goal? What are we doing with that information? And how, if at all, does that impact patient safety?
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking 10 o'clock, but is this the last section that you're gonna?
This is a new
section?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then I think I've seen Nicole come in also.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how long do you think it'll take for you to finish this up? Then we can take a break and we'll wait for Nicole and then start there, or?
Yeah, this is a new pillar.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's
So
go ahead and take a break now, 5-minute break.
We're slated for one break for this meeting for a 15-minute break.
15-minute
or a
break.
second half.
Yeah, let's just take a 15-minute break now, and then we'll come back and we can finish this up and we'll be.
Okay, so we'll resume at 10:15.
So yeah, 10 o'clock now, 10:15.
Okay.
Let's log back on.
Make sure to get some caffeine.
Oh, yeah.